Oh, how's the volume now, Francie? Any better? Good, bad? Francie, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you hear me, Francie? Good? Okay, that's good. Okay, good. Let's see if it's actually working on Facebook. I'm not sure if it's working. Oh, it claims that it is. Huh. I like that. Add a title. Do. One more sec, just getting things rolling. Okay. All right, give me half a sec while I escape. Gorilla started it and much too loud. Sorry. Okay. All right, I think it's working. Okay, welcome everybody. I've set up the table just ever so slightly with the help of Lori so that we could try to learn a little bit about how to run a Seder. The Seder does not begin when things look like this. And that's the first thing that I want to tell you. We have the benefit of 2 weeks' time between now and a Pesach. And I will say, Baruch Hashem, we're up to Chodesh Nisan. It's the month of redemption. So a good time to learn new things and to brush up maybe on some skills that we haven't used in a little while. So I'm actually going to bring my computer a little bit onto the table. At your Seder, you should not have a computer on your table for obvious reasons. But it'll just help me to be able to see what's going on. In case you have questions, you can sort of raise your hand as a way to do that, so we can have conversation as we go. Okay. First things first, the preparation for the Seder is what sets the stage for it. And the preparation begins with the preparation, obviously, of various foods we'll talk about tonight. And it also refers to having a little bit of forethought about what the Seder, who to anticipate at the Seder. Now this year, it will be different than all other years. We'll all be saying, how different is this night than all the other nights of Pesach we've ever had? And it's lamentable, it's a challenge, but let's see things in perspective. God willing, we'll have Pesach this year, we'll have Pesach next year. We're going to hopefully fulfill the mitzvot as best we can. And for some of us, that'll mean suddenly being empty nesters or a young couple, just the two people. For others, it might mean being alone for Pesach at the Seder table. But to recognize that one is still in the presence of Hashem, and to the extent possible, in cleaning one's house, preparing the house, and making the Seder table, that's a form of service of Hashem, of inviting Hashem into one's home. The night of the Seder itself is considered a most exalted evening in terms of not just the mitzvot of the eating of the foods and the telling of the story, but really its character over time, based on the way the Torah describes it, is really a very, very high one. It's comparable in some respects to the highest nights of the Jewish year. For all that, let's say, Yom Kippur is the highest night of the year, Leil Yom Kippurim in Shul, so Leil Pesach is the highlight of the year in the home. The number of mitzvot that are going to be accomplished and the dialogue, or perhaps the self-dialogue, which is maybe a dressed-up way of calling it a monologue, but the conversation that one has, if necessary, with oneself, and to review and to think and to also celebrate what it means to be Jewish and to be able to come back again to the holiday of Chag HaMatzot, also known as Pesach. Let's talk a little bit about the preparation phase of foods. And then I want to talk a little about preparation just from I talked a little just now, sort of spiritual, psychological perspective, but also I think it's important to think for those who are, let's say, a family, multi-generational, who are together, if not this year, they're thinking about next year already, about how to think about the Seder night a little bit as an event, as an experience. one of the organizing principles, obviously, at the Seder is just using the Haggadah. And I would urge you to consider, if you don't have a Haggadah, now's the time to go get one. Families who never made a Seder before are probably thinking, well, how are we going to do this? We don't even have the book. You need a book. You need a Haggadah. Most Jewish families, if they don't have a Haggadah, can procure one right here from Congregation Torah. You can go to Rosenblum's and help out there. Buy a nice sefer, a nice Haggadah that comes to your table. You'll use it every year. You'll make a pledge. I'm buying it this year. I'll use it, God willing, for 120 years. The reason why I mention is because it's a great way to organize yourself. Think, what are the phases of the Seder, and what do I need to prepare for in advance? Because a lot of the elements that come to the Seder table cannot really be prepared. There's just no time to prepare them on the night of the Seder. There is a tradition that we should start the Seder as soon as possible because of the reality that there are many mitzvot to accomplish. We want to get them in before midnight if we can, but also in case we have younger people at the Seder or maybe we're tired. So to think a little bit in terms of the planning, that everything is laid out just to come out right at the time of the Seder. In terms of the foods, the two main foods that you have to get well in advance, of course, are wine or grape juice and the matzah. As far as wine, so just to think, low alcohol content is better. You want to drink 4 cups. I'm going to discuss when we get to the actual Seder itself, how much you actually have to drink. It's not as much as you think. But to think about having enough wine for 2 Seders. Families oftentimes use grape juice. Our family is a mix of wine and grape juice. Anyone who's underage only drinks grape juice. Personally, I try to start with wine, but I don't always make it all the way through all 4 cups. I maybe dilute a little bit with grape juice. Anyway, if you can get wine, if you personal predilection, if you can get wine from Eretz Yisrael, it has a special significance, not just for supporting Medinat Yisrael, but quite frankly, it's the Peirot Haaretz, the fruits of the land of Israel, the Tirosh that comes from Eretz Yisrael, and it has, I believe, inherent significance in and of itself. The wine can be mevushal. There are those who try the night of the Seder to make sure that it's specifically not mevushal. You look on the back of any bottle, it'll say mevushal, which means basically pasteurized in a way, which usually is not great for the quality of the wine, apparently. I'm not really a connoisseur, so I don't really know one way or the other. But it is very important in terms of if you have someone who is not of the Jewish faith who's in your home, so there's an issue there. It's called stam yenam, that they shouldn't touch an open bottle of wine if it's not mevushal. The reason why sometimes the Leil HaSeder, people specifically look for wine that is not mevushal, and they're extra careful that there aren't, let's say, non-Jewish people who are going to be at the Seder. That's for other reasons. But the reason is because according to the Rambam, the wine that you use at the Seder should really be the same wine you could use to pour on the altar on the Mizbeach, that they used to pour wine out when they did the service in the Beit HaMikdash. So the wine that one gets should also be just like that. Yain mevushal, cooked wine, could not be used for the purpose of offerings of libations at offerings in Yerushalayim. So the idea is, Dafka, this is such an important, Leil HaSeder is a type of Avodat Hashem, service of Hashem. And of course, back in the day and someday in the future, the main part of the whole Seder, the eating of the Korban Pesach, is itself an offering. So the idea that the wine should match. I wouldn't go too crazy if I were you, especially not this year. If you have wine in your house, it's good. Don't make yourself too crazy. Red wine is preferable over white wine. If it's white wine that you have that's a higher caliber and quality, and you like it much better than red wine, isn't to hate. But the idea is that the red wine is particularly suited, according to many of the Sifrei Kodesh, for the nights of the Seder specifically. So that's wine. Number 2 is matzah. The matzah I'm going to take out soon, I'll remind you again then, is square matzah. It's made by a machine. Many people are try to take care. I just didn't want to take them out because I don't want to break the seals on the boxes that I have. There aren't too many boxes to be had, and I want to make sure nothing gets cracked. So one needs 3 full slices of matzah for each night to be under the covering at the table, which I'll get to in layout in a minute. But those 3 matzahs should ideally be shmura matzah. That it says on the box, matzah shmura. Be careful, make sure it has the proper hashgacha, an OU, a CRC, a kafke, something you recognize. If it's sold in Hungarian where the whole store is under the CRC, that's one thing. But if you're, let's say, in Jewel or what have you, be careful. Don't just buy something because it says matzah for Passover. Not necessarily so. You have to be careful with that. The matzah ideally should be round at the Seder, and it's the shmura matzah. Again, to the extent that you can, 3 pieces that are unbroken. You need other matzah, though, at your Seder in almost all circumstances, unless you're alone, in order to properly fulfill the mitzvah of the night. And I'll come to that when we get to the order. But just to think a little bit ahead, the wine and the matzah and the Haggadah, you have to buy well in advance. So you have it. And it's not going to go bad, but you should have it in the house already. Let me pause here before I get, the next thing I'm going to do now is the Seder plate, and how to prepare the various elements of the Seder plate. Let me pause for a minute. Any questions? No hands up? No texts? Okay, so let's go. So let's talk a little bit about the Seder plate. Because if you don't own a Seder plate, you can make one. It's really not that hard. First of all, inside many Haggadahs, I'm using this Haggadah. This is the copy. We try to give out the same copy of the Haggadah with the same pagination for every single person at the Seder, because people maybe at varying degrees of education. So instead of each person holding their own version, they want to have a second version. So one kid will bring with the pictures underneath, this one will have that, but stay organized. Myself, I usually use either this one or I have another one that I didn't even bring to the table tonight, but I keep it with me that I particularly love, that when there's a lull, I'll read something for myself. But in the very beginning of many Haggadot, it actually gives you the picture of the Seder plate. Actually, in this one, it's on page 18. Tells you the picture of what goes where on the plate. You can't see it, it's too far away. But when you open a Haggadah, oftentimes you'll find the diagram. I have a beautiful Seder plate I got as a present. So the Seder plate also, it's organized in this way with the different sections for the different foods. You don't need to have a Seder plate. If you don't have a plate, take a nice plate and literally just, you're going to put stuff in this order. Now the sequencing here does matter. There's a long-standing tradition to have a particular order. Let me go through these. Again, you can find everything that I'm saying really in any Haggadah. And before I go any further, if you don't have the CRC magazine, this is the CRC magazine. If you can't get one in paper, no problem. You can get it online. I've sent you the link for our shul a few times now, and it's in the Pesach resources. If you click there, you can get the link. You go on crcweb.org. It's very well done. It's extremely well done. In this magazine, you'll find listed in it on page 42 and 43 actually says Seder plate. And it will give you a checklist systematically. What do you need to have? How do you get it there, etc. So it gives you the various stages or pieces that you might need. Let's go through some of them because they do require preparation before Yom Tov. You cannot wait for the night up after the candles are lit and then say, oh, we're going to figure it out. All of this needs to be staged before. Some elements you can save from night 1 to night 2. Let me give you some examples. So I'm actually just going to go through based on how the plate is organized. There are 2 items at the top of the plate in the pattern. Hold it straight. Here we go. It's 12 o'clock. So 2 items that are on the top. On one side is the zroa, and the other side is the beitza. Zroa in English, the shank bone, sometimes called the shank bone, and beitza means an egg. Both of these are foods that are roasted, and in the case of the zroa, it's not eaten at the Seder at all. It shouldn't be, in fact. It's in remembrance of the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb offering, the Paschal Korban Pesach. And the beitza, many people have a tradition that if they're not going to eat the one that's on the Seder plate, then at least at the meal, they'll take other hard-boiled eggs, and they'll eat that. They'll dip it in salt water, and everyone will get a little piece. The zroa and the beitza need to be prepared beforehand by roasting. If you can't find a shank bone, and maybe in short supply this year, fear not. Many people use a piece of chicken. A chicken wing is something that some people like to use if they can't get a shank bone. In my family growing up, we used the neck of a chicken. It was roasted. Put it here. The reason why people use chicken wings is because zroa means an arm, an outstretched arm. And shank bone has a shape. It looks like an outstretched arm. So we say that God took us out with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, so we represent it that way. And we put a piece of meat here, which is roasted. And by contrast, none of the foods we eat at the Seder, in the meal, should be roasted foods. Not pan roasted and not roasted over a spit. You should have some kind of sauce. It doesn't mean you can't have, serve what's called a roast. It just means you have to have sauce mixed in with it, gravy, etc. It shouldn't be that you're eating something dry. Why? Because we want to show that we are not mimicking the Korban Pesach. We're showing its absence by not having any food that is tzli, roasted, or tzli kedar, pan roasted. The zroa and the beitza. How do you make the beitza? Boil up a dozen or half a dozen eggs. Take one of those eggs, and literally broil it for a few minutes. It's going to get braised looking. Sometimes they crack, the shell cracks. Doesn't matter. Sometimes the inside of it itself gets burnt. It doesn't matter. It just should have the shape still of an egg, and the zroa as well. By the way, little tip, in our family, we never put things down directly on the silver plate. It's just not good for it. And also some of the things that we put down are runny, and we want to use them night one to night two, let's say. So we have little like cups. They're like little plastic dishes. You probably could get them at a store or whatnot. You can't do that, so take little plastic cups even if you have to. You can make the Seder plate again pretty rudimentary. It doesn't have to be a silver plate, especially if you've never made a Seder before. So just take a regular dinner plate and organize things in this way. Zroa and Beitza at the top. The next two items I'm going to do on the two ends here. One is charoset and the other is karpas. Charoset has different ingredients depending on your family tradition. A number of years ago it was the Shabbos Hagadol Drasha, but there are a lot of different traditions. The basic ingredients are basic ingredients that will render a substance that looks like bricks. So the main ingredients typically, although there are differences here and there, are walnuts that are crushed, mixed in with grated apple, and mixed in right before the Seder. Not in the daytime, but that's right before the Seder, to pour some wine into it and to mix it together to create a consistency that looks like bricks. Some people like to take pieces of cinnamon, like cinnamon sticks, and at the last minute also, they crack the cinnamon sticks, well actually not the last minute, I should do this before Yom Tov also, crack the cinnamon sticks into pieces, and they sprinkle them on top of the charoset. Now this is not all the charoset you're making, not this little bit. You need more charoset separately in a bowl. So you should make a bowl full of charoset. How much? Depends on how many people you have. I'll come to why we need that. It's going to be later on in other parts of the Seder. The charoset that goes here is a small sample of the charoset that you're going to be using and pretty much stays here throughout the night. Again, walnuts, apples, wine or grape juice mixed in at the last minute. By the last minute, I mean before you start the Seder. Some people put dates. Some people put little pieces of lemon. There are a lot of different things. The year that I did charoset as the Shabbos Hagadol Drasha, I took a straw poll and had people send in, what do you put in your charoset? We got some pretty interesting answers of what people put in. If you're allergic to nuts, obviously that's a non-starter. In our family, we have people with nut allergies. We make the charoset over here with the nuts, and we have a bowl with the nuts version, walnuts, etc. But then we make a separate version, which looks a little bit more just like chunky applesauce for those who have nut allergies for obvious reasons. They're still able to participate and to have the charoset. They're just not having our charoset, but that's fine. That's the goal of it. And some people will put these items in to make it look like the mortar that was used with the bricks, or the mortar and the bricks rather. So there you have it. Karpas is a vegetable. Actually, if you're stuck, it's really any vegetable. Ideally, some say it should be a green vegetable, representing Chodesh Aviv, the season of spring rather. But the truth is, many families have different traditions. My family tradition happens to be potatoes. Why? My Zayd al-Hasham came from Europe, and in Europe, the town where he lived in Kovel, they didn't have a green vegetable in the spring. They had what they had. They had potatoes. So they used potatoes. Now, potatoes, if you're using potatoes, they do have to be cooked. I say that because if they're raw, it's not clear that the bracha on a potato that's raw today would be hadama. It might be shahakam. It has to be a food with a hadama bracha. Some families over time have used other things. Parsley is green. Some people use a piece of celery. Some people use other kinds of vegetables. There's one opinion that says maybe if you even use an onion. Onion is also a little bit of a question what the actual bracha on an onion is, because no one normally just bites into an onion on its own. So does it have an independent bracha? Anyway, the gist of it is it's a cooked vegetable. Sorry, it's not to be cooked. It's a vegetable whose bracha is ha'adam. It should not be a piece of lettuce. It should not be something that looks like maror, because that's coming up next. The karpas can also be canned potatoes. You have canned little potatoes. Just open the can. They're done. You're ready. Put it out. And here again, depending on how many people you have, the karpas is going to stay here as a little sampler, but what you're giving to everyone else is almost certainly going to be another bowl filled with whatever vegetable you're using. Also, for the evening, we need maror and chazeret. The truth is, maror and chazeret are really pretty much today the same thing. They're pretty much the bitter herb. The Gemara has 5 different examples of what it might be. And the Gemara pretty much says we don't really know what real maror is today. And then there's these 4 other examples. Romaine lettuce is probably the best, really, because the quantity that you can eat of romaine lettuce. Almost all the poskim agree romaine lettuce is best, but here also it needs preparation. Alternatively, people use horseradish. Now, 2 things to know. One is obviously the idea of the preparation of the maror and the chazeret. On my Seder plate, usually the maror is actually the romaine lettuce. It's a little piece of it. It's a tiny little piece, you understand? And the chazeret is usually some pieces of horseradish. Now, to prepare the horseradish, start with that, it's actually a little bit simpler. It's not that you're putting the whole stalk of the horseradish down in front of you. Before the holiday begins, you should grate it. And from those grated pieces, you should put it in a container, but you have to let it air out a little bit before you put it on the Seder plate. It's going to be extremely strong otherwise. Now you need a larger quantity of what we call general category maror, bitter herbs, because you're going to need it more than once in the evening. So it's not going to be enough to have this little sampler, just have 2 little pieces. You're going to need probably a little more of a content, a little quantity rather. Maror, which today, again, most people are using, let's say if you use romaine lettuce, you have to make sure, obviously, that it's free of bugs and that you've cleaned it before Yom Tov starts, ideally. On Yom Tov, it's a little more dicey. Start picking away to see if there are bugs in it. Better to use the heart of the romaine and not the full leafy piece, just because the outer leaves typically are filled with bugs, and they're much harder to take care of. In our family, the last number of years, we've been zoche to buy pre-washed and checked romaine lettuce from a local caterer. Star Caterers, the secret is out. I'm sure he'll be happy if people start ordering from him. You're at your own risk this year in terms of the COVID-19. I have no idea how that impacts things with the sanitary and this and that. I assume they're using the general hygienic standards, but in years past, that is what we've done. And it saved us a lot of time in terms of having to check all the leaves, because that something has to be done, again, before Yom Tov. You're not going to have time on Yom Tov on the night of the Seder. And for the second Seder, you're not allowed to prepare on the holiday day. You can only prepare at night. That's also complicated. So instead of that, just do it sort of the day in the afternoon, or even a day and a half before, whatever it is. And then you put the maror away, and one sample goes, the maror goes. Some Seder plates will actually end up. The maror and the chazeret will actually be the same item twice over. Again, because this whole debate, like what really is chazeret, probably more approximating the lettuce that we have, called tamcha, which we call romaine lettuce, and maror, the Gemara is left with like a little bit of a question mark. And so we have horseradish and different other kinds of things. There is a discussion, I should say, about whether you can use a horseradish from a jar. I know a lot of people do it, but there's a question, a problem there a little bit, because it's already been made in a way that involves a preservative. And there's a question about whether the maror has to actually be basically fresh and raw, as opposed to something that's already been preserved, pickled, or something like that. So I'm mentioning it. I thought people should have it in mind. Okay, let me pause here. Let me review again. Sorry. The items that need roasting are at the top: zroa and beitza. The items that need some kind of preparation that are vegetables or fruits that involve active preparation in terms of either cooking or mixing things are the charoset and the karpas. And then we have maror and chazeret, 2 items which are both the 2 types of the bitter herbs. And if you don't have 2 types, put whatever you're using for maror, put in chazeret, and vice versa, and it's fine. All of that works. Let me pause here. We just talked about the preparation of getting the haggadah, the wine, the matzah, and the setting up of the Seder plate. Let me pause for a minute. Questions, comments? Oh, I see here there's 4 chats. I'm missing, sorry. Okay, so a few questions that came in. Oh, the question was answered already. Right. Right. You don't want the charoset to get mushy. That's the technical term. Thank you for that. So you want to add the wine or the sweet wine. It's nicer, why not? The charoset can taste sweet. Some people make it taste more pungent. You want that to happen right before the Seder, because otherwise it's going to get soggy, basically. So if you're putting the wine in over here, the charoset you can use. So the charoset you can use for other things at the Seder, you can wait till you're about to use it, and you pour in the wine. You mix it up right then and there. When it's a Seder on Shabbos, this is much more complicated, but that's not our situation this year. and it's not going to be next year either, I don't think. So I'm tabling it. I'm not talking about it. You can eat the beitza. You can absolutely eat the beitza. When you eat the beitza, though, you really, the beitza on the Seder plate, I would counsel you, don't bother eating the one from the Seder plate if you can avoid it. Have another bowl with hard-boiled eggs, peeled from before Yontif, if you can, that you're just going to give out. Some years, I've actually eaten the beitza, but then to the end of your Seder, it's like it's missing. So it's like, well, we have another one, and you're going to make another one for the next night. So if you just made one, it's, again, this is like the display piece. It's much more for its visual import than for the mitzvah of eating. The mitzvah of eating are going to come out in separate bowls, separate pieces. The Seder plate at the end of the evening, great question. The Seder plate at the end of the evening, honestly, you can just cover it with saran wrap and put it in the fridge. It does not have to be deconstructed and made anew the next night if you want to keep it. I don't see any reason not to. It's not like a mitzvah that you have to put out new stuff. It's the same stuff. Now, if it looks bad, so you want to make it look nice. If the charoset got soggy because you added a little wine to that, as you were adding the wine to the charoset in your other bowl, so the next night you scoop it out and put in more charoset like that. Okay, that's the basic setup of foods that you need, and that's always a source of stress for people because they're kind of like, well, when am I going to get all this done? It all has to be done before Yom Tov starts. Don't forget, it's like this every year. But if you've gone Pesach programs, you maybe weren't as conscious of it. Once you hit whatever that time is, the 5th hour of the day, the end of the 5th hour, you're not allowed to own chametz anymore. So you're done cleaning. You're taking care of that. So all you have left is cooking for Yom Tov. So add to the menu. These are the things that need to be prepared. And they can be laid out early. You can make it ready. In fact, the Shulchan Aruch writes, a person should have the table ready as much as they can, as much as possible, before Yom Tov. Why? So that when it's time to eat, it's time to eat. You don't have to wait with setting this and that. Now let's talk about a few other elements of setting up the room just for consideration and for thoughts. I'm talking about physically, the setup of the room. And again, thanks to Lori for helping me set up this beautiful table. So a few things that you want to make sure are on the table before you begin. Obviously, cups, plates, and all that, cutlery that people may need for the meal, but they may be in the way if you put them out too early. And perhaps it's wiser to think more strategically about the fact that you're going to have the Seder, the meal's coming later, like how many utensils do you need at one time? So here's the bare bones sort of basics of what should be on the table. First of all, not everybody needs a Seder plate. You can have one Seder plate for the whole table. It's a really long table, so make 2 Seder plates. Why not? It doesn't have to be that way, though. 1 Seder plate suffices. Also, the layout of the table, where the Seder plate goes, according to tradition that I follow, and there are different minhagim, and some people do things a little bit differently. Here's what I do, is that the matzah goes over here in front of me, and the Seder plate is just over yonder, just past it. This has a lot to do. This is the tradition of the Arizal, Rabbeinu Yitzchak Luria, the Ariya Kadosh, and that's the tradition that I have, that I follow from my grandfather. That's actually what's in the Art Scroll Haggadah as well, where it gives you the list, the sort of the pictogram of where things go. It'll show you where everything goes, and then it'll tell you where the matzah goes, which is just here at the foot of it. Some people have a beautiful Seder plate, which also is done deliberately, where it's a raised Seder plate, and there are compartments inside, and then the Seder plate itself is kind of attached on top, and there's like these little doors, and they pull it out. That's another tradition, and there's something to that. There are other traditions as well. Whatever your family tradition is, that's what you do. It's not a major mitzvah. If you mess this up, you don't remember the night of Seder, what are we going to do? All right, that's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. It's a beautiful tradition. Don't take it lightly, but it's not the end of the world if you didn't get it exactly right. That's the setup of Seder plate and the matzah. Now, you might have more than one person sitting with the matzahs. They could each have a Seder plate technically, but there may not, especially this year, it may not be enough to go around. In addition to what you see on the table, the Seder plate and the matzah, again, just to remind you, we're talking about a separate bowl with extra charoset, a separate bowl with extra karpas. We'll talk about how much you need in a minute, and a separate bowl with the maror. And if you have a separate food that you're using, some people are going to use romaine and horseradish, then you need 2 different bowls, one of more romaine and one horseradish. That could be on the table, or it could be off to the side, or it could be in another room, doesn't matter. But the point is, you have in mind, okay, I'm going to need those things. They're coming up as part of the Seder. Okay, now, next thing. On the table also, I'm going to get to the matzahs in a minute, but on the table also, a Kiddush cup for yourself, if you're leading the Seder, but also anybody who's at the Seder needs to have their own Kiddush cup. A Kiddush cup doesn't have to be silver. It could be a glass, a cup, whatever. But, and this is the important caveat, unlike other nights when we make Kiddush, this could also go in the Mani Shtana category, when we make Kiddush on the night of the Seder, we also try to make sure that each time we drink from the cup, we're going to drink minimally Rov Kos, most of the cup, and maximally we're going to drain the cup. So if you got yourself a massive cup, you want to be super machmir, wait a second, that's not necessarily a smart idea because it's good for cup 1, cup 2, but you're going to drink cup 3 and 4 on a full stomach at the end of the night in rapid succession. That's not going to work so well. So you have to think a little bit strategically. And here also, prepare before Yom Tov. You cannot do this on Yom Tov. The minimum amount that you need to drink, ideally, what I tell people is 3.3 ounces. That's how big we're talking. That's how much you really have to drink. Now, that's called a revid. There are, like everything else, differences of opinion about how much the quantities that are mentioned in the Gemara, based on the Torah, how much they actually work out to in ounces, fluid ounces. Sometimes it's measured in weight. Sometimes you are all familiar with the notion of a cubit, of an amma. How many inches is that? Depends who you ask. Different sages in the Talmud. And then later on, especially different interpreters among the Rishonim and the Achorim, the early sages, the later sages, and right up to our present day, there were differences of opinion about, so how many ounces are we really talking about? Let me pause here to mention that also in the CRC guide, and I do not get a commission from them, believe you me, but if you have any health issues, you can turn to page 46 in the guide. Again, you can find this online. Just scroll down, print out the pages you need. Dietary Needs at the Seder by Rabbi David Cohen and Mrs. Chana Shore, who's a registered dietitian nutritionist. So they'll give you what the amounts are that you need to drink and to eat to still fulfill the mitzvot of the Seder as best you can. So it gives you a description. There's a minimum amount. I mentioned 3.3 ounces, but really you can eke out with 2.9 ounces. And then there's higher levels of alcohol content and lower levels of alcohol content. Then you're going to get light grape juice. Are you going to water down the grape juice? How much can you water down the grape juice or the wine? After which point, say, this isn't really wine anymore. It's water with some coloring. So that's also a halachic discussion. I don't want to get too technical, but just to tell you, you can find this in this guide. It's in the CRC guide, and it's written in plain, simple English. And it'll tell you how you can still do things. People who are suffering with health ailments of various food types, GI related, maybe there's someone who's on dialysis, how much they can consume. Maybe there's someone who has diabetes, juvenile diabetes. They don't know how much they can eat. So there's a way to work things out for many of these elements. What about someone with Crohn's? What about someone who's gluten-free? So there also, I should have mentioned before, if you're gluten-free, right now, you probably could still get, it's not cheap, but you could get oat matzah. You can get matzah made of oats that is called gluten-free matzah. So avail yourself of it. Why not? You could still fulfill the mitzvah. Now, you're not going to get enough matzah. It is very expensive. I have someone who I know who eats only gluten-free. So they said, I can't afford more than one box. It's crazy expensive. Okay, so you do what you can. And that's what you eat. Sometimes you can't find the gluten-free matzah. You can't find handmade, the oat matzah, handmade. Sometimes only machine matzah. But if it says shmura matzah, so okay, so use that at the Seder. If you totally can't find that, it's a difference between either I can eat oat matzah made by a machine at the Seder or nothing. So still better to eat the oat matzah made by the machine, even if it's not shmura. Again, if you're stuck, you're stuck. But here you have all of the descriptions about how much you could get away with in terms of the sizes and the amounts, etc. I think it should be very helpful, I hope, for people who have dietary requirements. So the cups themselves, you can measure before Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, it's a little more complicated. You're not allowed really to use a measuring cup with the lines on it, exactly how many ounces and milliliters. You're not really allowed to do that on Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's forbidden to measure things, to weigh things, etc. If you have, you're putting in a cup of sugar and you have a cup and you fill the cup with something, that's not really measuring, you're just filling up a cup. But once we talk about where there's lines and you're sort of seeing how much is it, that's a little more complicated. So find a cup that's 3.3 ounces, or you want to take the lower amount, 2.9, that's even lower. You can look this up for yourself and get a cup that's that size. And if your beautiful becher is a beautiful becher, but it's way too big, so then just use a smaller cup and keep the nice Kiddush cup on the table. Everyone will see how beautiful and ornate it looks. Unfortunately, some of the cups out there are too small. Sometimes you find there's a little kid who has a cup. It's okay, they're a little kid. They're not bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, so they're little. You know, if they're already the age of chinuch, it means they're already 8, 9, 10, 11. They don't understand what's going on. They should have a regular, proper sized cup. They'll be drinking grape juice, but okay, they'll at least feel I'm doing it the right way. That's our educational process. Sometimes you have a little kid. I saw one, a little kid, they'll have a little tiny little cup. They get them to 3. The kid is already a year before the bat mitzvah, and she's still drinking from a little cup. That's not appropriate. She can keep it on the table. It's a memento, but she should have a proper cup. Okay, so we talked just now about Kiddush cups, and everybody at the table, unlike other nights, Manishtan Laila Zeh, and the night of Pesach, everybody's meant to drink because everybody is publicizing the miracle. Men drink, women, the kids, everyone should have their glass again. It can be non-alcoholic if that's necessary, but it should really be such that everyone participates, and when it's time to drink, that everyone will drink together. Another word about the drinking, in terms of alcohol versus non-alcohol. So it's true, Moshe Feinstein actually held that ideally it should be alcoholic content because that's considered more refined, and you're drinking grape juice. If you're stuck, so fine, but if you're not stuck, it should be with alcohol. Rav Yosef the Levi Soloveitchik disagreed. He said, I think that the drink should be a shtia areva, a pleasant experience. If I like grape juice and I really can't stand dry wine, and I don't like sweet wine because I don't like the alcohol, so I can have grape juice because that's what I want to have. And so on and so forth. Referencing also what I said before, again, according to at least the Rambam, so grape juice wouldn't work because it's also cooked wine. It's not even wine. So that certainly couldn't be used as libation, as a yayin nesa. The libations poured on the altar in Yerushalayim. Okay, but you don't necessarily have to be makbid for the Rambam. I'm not able to for all 4 cups. So I do what I can, and that's hopefully acceptable. Every person in front of them should not only have the Kiddush cup, but it's good that each person should have, I put it here, Lori left it on her plate. Mine usually goes like over here, is the plate that you're going to use for messiness at the table. There are various things you're going to eat that are dripping, that are soggy, whatever it is. So you actually hold the plate and you can eat over the plate. It doesn't make as much of a mess. When you're going to pour out later on in the Haggadah for the 10 plagues, some people use a finger, some people pour out a little bit, so it's going to make a little bit of a mess. In fact, for that, I really have a little bowl that I use. Most people around my Seder table in general have done the finger method with one drop after the other. Personally, my minhag from my family, I pour a little off. Okay, so I have a plate, and then if the plate gets too messy, you take it to the sink, you rinse it off, you bring it back, and then you have the plate again. It doesn't make a crazy mess at the table. Okay, what else? So this covers sort of, again, the setup. Another thing that goes on the table, doesn't have to be from the beginning, is that massive cup in the foreground here for you, in the background for me, and that's a kos shel Elio. You don't have a fancy kos, use whatever kos you have. That's the cup of Elio. Nobody drinks from that cup. It's filled up with wine, and we leave it on the table for later on in the Seder. Some people like to have it on the table the whole time. Other people leave it off to the side. They bring it at the last minute when they need it, which is toward the end of the Seder. Let me pause here before we get to the actual running of the Seder, which is the next section, to see if there's any questions, anything I missed. Okay, so let's go. All right, another element of preparation. 2 more elements of preparation on the physical side before we get to the Seder itself. Number 1, a person should have, ideally, and you can't always do it, but if you're only 2 people or you're by yourself, then you definitely should be able to do it. If you have 200 people at the Seder, not everybody can do it. So you try your utmost. At the Seder, one of the things we do to show that we're free, of course, is Haseba. Haseba means to lean. The minhag Yisrael is to lean specifically to the left side. Why? A whole discussion. Shouldn't be to the right, not forwards, not backwards reclining, only to the left side. So in my family, we try to do it. Not everyone around the table can always be accommodated. There's not enough room. The people who don't have enough room, so they literally just go like this. They lean to the side. They lean on the next person. But I try to get a pillow, and I put the pillow, we have a special pillowcase. You can buy this, again, may not be for everybody, but if you're making a Seder every year, so you think, I buy it once, get it a present, I'm going to have it. So this over here is a pillow, literally. And we leave it over here. And then when I have to lean, I can lean to the left, which basically looks like this. For many people, it's not all that comfortable. I'll grant you, for me, I don't feel it's all that comfortable either. But as the night wears on, my feet usually go up, and I'm usually leaning more and more for different parts of the Seder, but also it enables me to have the table right here. So if I'm eating matzah or whatever, I can hold a plate and I can eat as much as I need to, or the Kodesh sandwich, etc. And that's the leaning to the left, with a second chair sort of sideways. If you can't do that, which many people cannot, again, just lean. Some people bring a pillow to the table, so they put it behind them. It's very nice, it's good. When it's time to drink, you have to sort of angle yourself so you're leaning into the pillow, so you're leaning a little bit to the left. What's the angle of how much you have to lean? I don't know. There's no shear. The point is you have to lean. So why? The notion of reclining is a sign of freedom, aristocracy. I spoke about a little bit in the Haggadah Insights Shir this morning. So we'll leave it for now. Last thing. Well, two last things. Sorry. I just keep forgetting one last thing. A bag for the afikomen. You can use a Ziploc bag. It doesn't have to be a fancy bag. It's just, again, we make it every year. So when we got married, members of our family bought us nice things. We have it. So we have it every year. So you put the matzah you're going to use for the afikomen in here, and it should go either under, behind. It should go, because some people put it under the tablecloth. It should go somewhere where it is guarded. And of course, if one is zocha to have young people at the Seder, invariably they figure out a way to make it disappear on at some point. Some families, the parents hide it, the kids look for it. In other families, the kids hide it, the parents look for it. Whatever. It's a nice minhag. There are people who were against this minhag, but I think there's actually a very beautiful explanation behind it. But I'm going to leave you hanging on that because we got to get to the next part of the Seder. Okay, the matzahs. Inside the cover, I actually have to wrap in plastic. It's not like this on my table with the night of, but the matzah I'm using is regular machine matzah because I don't want to take out my shmur matzah. I'm using square matzah from a machine. I'm not using the round matzah. You should have it safe just for demonstration purposes. But in my covering here, there are actually 3 compartments. Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. That's how it's organized, at least written on this beautiful matzah cover. If you don't have that, you can literally take 3 paper napkins, or 4. You put one down, you put a matzah, put a covering, put a matzah, put a covering, put a matzah, put a covering. 4 things, one underneath. You should have something underneath, by the way. Normally we call it a challah tray, but here there should be something underneath. And then the matzahs are staggered in each in their own compartment. The matzahs themselves that you take out of the box, again, the night of the Seder, I try, Erev Pesach, to start counting up how many whole matzahs I have. And the ones that are very obviously broken, I keep in a separate box that sits on a chair, like off in the corner, because I'm going to need it. There's no way I'm going to have enough for more than myself, pretty much, maybe for Lord, from the 3 matzahs. And there's a lot of people sometimes who could be there. You have to think ahead. I'm going to get to the shiur in a minute. The 3 matzahs are going to, at various points, be taken out and held together. And at various points, you're going to open the covering so that the matzahs are visible so people can see them. Let's now get to the preparation of the other part of the Seder before we get to the how-to of actually going through the Haggadah, which is the following. We just talked about all the physical preparations. We just talked about setting up the table, the things you need to make in advance, things you need to order in advance and measure in advance and see what's what. The part that so often falls by the wayside is a recognition of who's at the Seder. Now, if you're by yourself, so unfortunately this year it'll be a very challenging Seder in its own right. If it's just 2 people, so there's one other person there, so maybe you know each other very well, and you're both around the same age, that'll bring its own challenges. If you have the benefit of having children or grandchildren, or they're not your children, they're children who are there, so think strategically how to make the Seder an engaging time for them. We don't have time now tonight to get into all the different types of games and ideas, but just start thinking, how can I make this interesting for the people who are coming to my Seder? Not fancy divrei Torah, not big elaborate talks, taflis. I'm talking to the 4-year-old who's going to be at the table. How am I going to make it interesting for them? So my family in various years, we've brought stacks of towels, and I had all the kids, everyone dressed up like they were pilgrims, like leaving Egypt. Some years we've made yamsuf out of taking like blue sheets and putting them over chairs, and then we got everyone, the kids walked through. Again, you have to work on the age level that the people who are at your Seder are up to. If it's only people who are older at the Seder, or it's just a couple who are together. So that's not a reason to just say, well, we don't have to think about the Seder in advance. Think a little bit, how can we make this interesting? What kinds of things do we want to reflect on at the Seder that are about our joint family story, our national story, our previous Pesach Seders together, our reflections on how different this Seder is than other Seders? I would just caution, please, in advance to think a little bit. The Seder is actually a very joyous occasion. And it is so easy to get into the downward spiral of making the whole night somehow conversation about woe betide us. Look for brachas, look for simcha, and find, it might be very hard. There's no gainsaying that it's going to be challenging for so many people this year. Try your utmost to think, what points of simcha do I have? And chayav adam lirot atzma kilu hu yatzam mitzrayim, person to see themselves like they left Egypt, means just that, to internalize my people. I personally am descended of the people, and I, on a certain level spiritually, was one of the people who can see myself as a slave in a time of confinement and servitude, subjugation, oppression, but we got out of it. And now we have a Seder. To think a little bit along those lines, and I know you might think, well, what does that do with making a Seder? I think it has everything to do with making a Seder, because if all these physical elements are prepared, but the mindset is low, that's going to make it challenging. The garb. So you'll notice I'm wearing my kittel. I only wear the kittel on two separate occasions. The Yamim Noraim, the high holy days, it's the same kittel I wear in Shul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and I wear it the Leil HaSeder. The cleaners knows I come twice a year. After Yom Kippur, I bring it in to get ready for Pesach, and after Pesach, I bring it in with the stains, usually from wine, from Haroset, from whatever, for the forthcoming time period of the Yamim Noraim. That's because, among other reasons, the idea that this is a leil of avodah, of service of Hashem. I mentioned this before. The only night of the year a person wears a kittel and a talit in shul is the night of Yom Kippur. So this is the only other night that people wear a kittel. It's not a must, and if you don't own a kittel, you don't have to run to go buy one. It's not a mitzvah. It happens to be in my family. I remember growing up, my Zedel, the Shalom, wore a kittel, and that made a big impression on me when I would see him. I was a little boy. I would see it. There's something very special going on. So it's customary to wear a kittel. I don't wear a jacket. I wear a kittel instead, so I can have enough, cool enough air-wise to be able to breathe, to experience the Seder. Okay, so I think we just covered all the preparation. Let me pause here. If there are other questions that have come up in the interim that people want to ask. Okay, so far so good. So should we get started with the Seder a little bit? Let's get rolling. Try to learn a little bit about the Seder itself. Let me just, here we go. Okay, so let's go into the Seder, the Leil HaSeder itself. So I mentioned already, I'm going to publish the time. I don't remember the exact time now, but it's basically whatever time the stars come out, that's when you can start making Kiddush. You could start 5 minutes earlier with the singing of the table of contents. Many people sing the Kadesh, I'm not going to do all the songs tonight because I'm not sure how many people here are doing this for the first time, meaning they've never been to a Seder versus just they haven't run it. So there isn't a halacha that you have to say everything with a tune. You can just read Kadesh, Urchatz, Kapas, Yachatz, but the point is you're going through sort of ordering what's going to happen through the night, and that traditionally is the beginning of the Seder. It's the 15 stages of the evening. For Kiddush, everyone should really stand for the recitation of Kiddush, but the other 3 cups, typically one is seated at the table. The first bracha of Hagafen is recited. In some families, every single person says the Kiddush in an undertone together with the leader of the Seder. Why? I mentioned it previously. Unlike other nights where one person can make Kiddush for the whole table, on the night of the Seder, really everyone should make Kiddush. Sometimes they go person to person, and sometimes everybody just says it together. When I say everybody, I actually mean everybody. So it's men, it's women, it's children. Everybody should say together the Kiddush so that they're able to participate. Let's say a person really doesn't read Hebrew. They're stuck. They're standing. They're going to be embarrassed. So in that case, you would tell that person, listen, don't say the Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. Just say Amen to Baruch Hagafen, and say Amen when I'll say Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim, and say Amen to the Shechiyanu blessing. Now the Shechiyanu blessing is not recited by women who lit candles, because they recited Shekhinah blessing already at the time that they lit the candles. So just to keep that in mind as well. All these instructions you'll find in many of these Haggadahs. Again, the family Haggadah, it's walking you through in italics over each thing. What do you say here? What do you say here? What do you say here? It's, I think, pretty self-explanatory, but again, it can feel daunting in advance. But the power of preparation is such that you can do these things in advance to think a little bit about sort of imagining in your mind's eye how things are going to run, which makes it a lot less stressful at the time of. Now, the drinking of the cups, all 4 cups, really needs to be seated and leaning. So whereas the blessings of the Kiddush are recited standing for the first bracha of Kiddush, the other 3 cups, you make the bracha seated, sitting down at the table. They're part and parcel of the Seder, but Kiddush typically we stand. When it's time for the drinking, here again, there goes my plate. Again, I usually have the plate like over here. I'll take my cup, my Kiddush cup. I'll be whole. It's very full. Not too. It doesn't have to be overflowing. Just it could be whatever it is, a quarter, 1/8 of an inch from the top. I'll lean very, very slow. And everybody's leaning. Everybody's sitting, and I'll drink down the cup as best I can to rov kos, if not the entire kos. Most of the cups, not all of the cups. Again, you measure before. Take a measuring cup before Yom Tov. Figure out how big is my kos. You know, 5-ounce kos. That's very big, and it's not necessarily a good idea when you talk about what's going to happen later in the Seder. So that's Kadesh. That's the Kiddush itself. Urchatz, it says right here, you just, in my family, I don't know all families, but in my families, everybody gets up, everybody goes to wash their hands, and you don't make a bracha. There's no bracha on Urchatz. We dry our hands and come back to the table. There are some families where only one person is going to wash. Whatever your family tradition is, it's great. But if one person is going to wash, oftentimes that person doesn't get up from the table. Someone brings them a basin and brings them the cup with the water in it, and they pour, and everybody sees it happening. It's more of like a performance than it is for everybody to do it. I won't explain tonight, but next Thursday morning, if you want to join me, I'm going to do a redux on my Shabbos Hagadol Drasha from last year, which suddenly seems so absolutely timely for this year. It was about Urchatz, Rachza, and hand washing, its significance in Judaism for Netilat Yadayim, and particularly on this holiday of Pesach, and particularly at the Seder. So I'm going to do a redux of that Shabbos Hagadol Drasha, and hopefully I can do yet another Shabbos Hagadol Drasha new for this year that I'm also working on. But that'll be next Thursday, 9:30 in the morning. So after Urchatz, that's when Karpas comes about. Now, Karpas, I mentioned before, is this vegetable. Ideally, the piece that you eat should be small. It says so right here. It should be smaller in volume than half an egg. Imagine your mind's eye what an egg looks like. Whatever the volume of half of that would be, that's really how much you need to eat. It shouldn't really be more than that if you can avoid it, because if you eat more than that, there starts to be a bit of a question. Do you have to say a bracha achrona, the bracha of borei nefashot, at that moment? So we don't want to get into that really, because one of the things we remind everybody, and it says so in the art scroll has it, all the Haggadahs that I have, you have English, it'll say, so have in mind, and you tell everybody, the leader of the Seder says, have in mind when you say the bracha adama on this vegetable, that we are going to have it in mind for the maror that we're going to eat later in the Seder. The karpas is not just put on a fork, and you can do it, or you can pass it around, everyone takes a piece. If you're leading the Seder, make sure to cut the pieces a little bit smaller. There's an 8-year-old child who has a really big piece. Okay, you don't have to sue for justice for everything, you know what I mean? You see someone doesn't know anything about a Seder, took a big piece, it's the first time they ever came to a Seder in their life, use your judgment, use your seichel. But people who are, let's say, more okuran with the reality, if you didn't preempt it and say, please, we're only supposed to have a little piece, so people are more okuran. If you have to correct it, it's a little bit big, use your judgment and your tact. Judgment and tact, very important, because we have much bigger things we need to do at the Seder than to get bogged down that a person took too much karpas. That should be the biggest problem. But again, ideally, less than the size of half an egg. Each person then is going to dip it into salt water. The salt water is another bowl you have to prepare. Some prepare it before Yom Tov. The truth is, if you didn't, it's Yom Tov, and you can really prepare it on Yom Tov. If you're stuck, take a bowl of hot water, boiling hot water, pour salt into it. Make sure that the salt is kosher l'Pesach. That might sound elementary, but iodized salt is off limits on Pesach. Maybe people don't realize that. They figure salt is salt, but it's treated, and you have to know that in advance. There is someone invariably goes out to the store to purchase a bottle of salt water, and P.T. Barnum is smiling from his grave if you're that person. There is no need and no purpose at all to have a bottle of salt water. You have salt, you have water, hopefully you have hot water. It's just that simple to make. You don't need mass quantities of it. You're just dipping the food in before you make the bracha. You make the bracha, Borei Pri Adama, everybody eats. We don't lean typically when we eat the karpas. We just eat it, and that's it. Yachatz is already the breaking of the matzah. Let me demonstrate how this goes. Again, it's strictly a simulation. I have this wrapped in plastic. And again, on my Seder table, the three matzahs are not grouped together. They're actually, each one has its own level. So you actually have to take them out. The yachatz is actually that you take the middle matzah out specifically, and you break it in half as best you can. Again, demonstration purposes only. In reality, it should be the round matzah. Break it as best you can. You crack it in half as best you can. Take the bigger half, which is an oxymoron. It's not a half, it's bigger. I don't know, it's almost right down the middle. Let me see how, imagine this one. This one is going to go into the bag, and it's going to be the middle, the matzah, which is going to be the afikomen. Now, this portion is then going to be put away for later. In some communities here, very interesting, Sephardim very often will take the afikomen that's in the bag and they'll sling it over their shoulder. So I'm not putting it in now for reasons I explained previously, but you put it in the bag, you zip the bag, and they flip it over their shoulder. And some of them actually get up and walk around the table. Personally, I was at it was my Seder in Connecticut, where there was a gentleman, his family was out of town, he had to be there for some reason. They went to Florida or something, he was stuck in Connecticut by himself, a Sephardi fellow of a Sephardic extraction. And at this moment in the Seder, he said, I'll be right back. And he walked out the door of the front door of our house and closed the door. So everyone's looking at each other. This is highly unusual. It was something we said. What's he going to get? We hear a knock at the door. So I go to the door, open the door. He's standing at the door. He says, no, close the door. So you just knocked on the door. He said, no. You have to say from the other side, who is it? Okay, I went to the door. I hear knock, knock, knock. Who is it? He says, a Jew from Egypt. I say, okay, so I open the door. No, do it again. It's like a comedy sketch. But what was going on? It was a dialogue. And in his community, growing up, this is what they did. They would walk outside. One person stay inside. Everyone knock on the door. Who are you? I'm a Jew from Mitzrayim. Where are you going? I'm going to Eretz Yisrael. Open the door. They come in for the Seder. There's that element of like traveling around, and you can be creative. There's no reason you can't tell everybody, Seder, everybody up. We're going on a little walk. Now, people might be getting annoyed. It's 10 o'clock at night. You're still going. So pace yourself, but it doesn't mean you can't do anything fun or mix stuff up that is going to help drive home the message. Now, this half of the matzah that went into the afikomen bag, again, should be put away somewhere. The afikomen is a symbolic representation of the Korban Pesach. We have a halacha that a korban needs to always be guarded. It should become ritually impure. Now, it's symbolic because that's not true for the matzah. It's just matzah. But we've designated that's what we're going to eat at the afikomen. By the by, this is not going to be enough for the afikomen, certainly not for all people at your table, which is why you're going to need extra matzah. But at least part of what they'll eat will be from whatever goes in the bag. So you have that piece that's there. The other piece gets picked up, and you wave it around, and you read, Ha-lach ma'anya. This is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate when they were slaves in Egypt. There is no reason not to read this halach ma'anya in English if the people at your table don't understand Aramaic. I'm not saying not to read it in Aramaic. Many people know beautiful songs. Halach ma'anya, the different songs. Halach ma'anya, I know two tunes myself. I'm sure many people know tunes. But the idea is we're saying the traditional language, but also in a language that the people at our table will understand what's going on. Then the middle matzah is put back inside, close it. And here, I'm not going to do it now because it's going to be a little confusing, but you're meant to actually take the Seder plate, lift it up. Some people, just to be strange about it, will dab it on various random people's heads. Other people will put it on their own head, or they'll put it on the side of the table, or they'll just walk out. Also, just walk out. And you're doing that so that someone will say, what are you doing? That's a question. And you want to get the kids, if there are kids at your Seder, to ask a question. If there isn't particularly a child at your Seder, everybody knows the trick already. So, okay, pick up the plate anyway. Traditionally, put it on the side. And then we pour the second cup. Much of the Haggadah is going to be recited in the presence of two things. The Kiddush, wine, one of the 4 cups, the Dalit calls it the first time, it's called Kiddush. For Kadesh is Kiddush. The other 3 times, the other 3 of the 4 kosot. The matzah is also very often at the Seder, various points, going to be uncovered. The Torah says that the matzah is called lechem oni, ayin vav nun yud, which the Gemara Verisi understands either as bread of affliction or as the bread upon which many words are spoken. Lechem she'onin alav dvarim harbe, in its presence. So we sort of fold it over. Doesn't have to be all the matzahs, it could just be the top flap. So you see the Kohen matzah, if you will. Some people like to pull them all out so they're kind of visible. That's not yet. That's going to be after the manishtana. The manishtana I mentioned already this morning in the shir is a syntax has to be read by the youngest person at the table. If the youngest person is just you, let's say, and one other person, whoever's younger is the one who recites it. In some families, they go up in age order from youngest to oldest, and in some families, everybody ends up singing it together. The truth is, if there's a younger person there, they say it. What if a person is by themselves for Pesach? It could happen. It's happened in the history of Judaism. It's not unheard of that it never happened in the history. That's why the Rambam writes that if you're by yourself, so shoel et atzmo, you ask yourself the questions. There's a value in Judaism, not just in doing and in thinking, believing, and accepting, but also in speaking. And there's an inherent value in dibur. You have machshava, dibur, and maaseh. All of those are involved and engaged, certainly on Leil HaSeder, with dibur taking a front seat in the proceedings. So what else can I tell you? Okay, after the manishtana, you're bringing back the Seder plate to its place, and then you uncover, this is very important, by the way, it seems like a little detailed stagecraft, but it's not, it's fundamental. Lechem she'onin dvarim harbe, the matzah should be visible. If you forgot and you're already into the sipur, uncover it right then and there. You don't have to start again, but it's considered pretty vital. You want to have it present and accounted for. I won't spend time reading through with you the whole Maggid section. I'll fast forward, but every person hopefully owns a Haggadah or can look online between now and Pesach. You have 2 weeks. And unfortunately, so many of us are just in our homes. It's a beautiful sefer and with so many layers and layers of meaning and understanding. There are so many websites with ideas. There's no shortage. I myself have given shiurim over 12 years now, Baruch Hashem, about the Haggadah. So you can look those up if it's of interest. But why just content yourself waiting for the night of? Here again, you prepare a lot of different things to say. There's different instructions at various points. But again, if you have a Haggadah with English in it, it'll give you the actual instructions. It tells you where to cover the matzah, v'hi she'amda, cover the matzah, raise the goblet. V'hi she'amda, whatever tune you use. V'hi she'amda, whatever tune you use, you say it, put it down, it tells you what to do. And then when you finish, each time you're putting down the cup, it's back again with the matzahs uncovered. Let's fast forward because we're already a couple minutes over time. So the reading of the Haggadah itself and Divrei Torah, I'm skipping here. That was Haggadah Insights this morning. It'll be the shir next Thursday. And again, everything that's indexed online. The next active part, of course, is the drips of the dam, va'esh, v'tim rosh hashan. So you could just do that, drops and drops. I neglected to mention that most people do not lean during the Maggid section of the Seder. Why? Just because you're in the midst of telling a story, part of which is really a very challenging story. It's matchil beginut. We start off with denigration and we end with praise. So the tradition typically is not to necessarily lean. Okay, again, if you see a kid who's leaning, be smart about it. Have seichel. When are you instructing a child, and when are you, God forbid, inadvertently pushing them away if you have such a person at your Seder? The 10 plagues, typically we pour out. And I'm tempted to make a joke here about plagues, but I will not, because as much as I'm trying to keep my sense of humor, I'm not sure that I want to even say or do anything that makes a joke in that vein. After you pour out all that wine, again, pouring or with your finger, so then you have to refill the cup again, and you remove the plate or the shissel if it's a bowl that might have little bits of wine in it. You take it away, put it in another room, rinse it out, whatever. This plate that I keep using, I rinse it, I bring it back, and that's it. Again, there's a section of the Haggadah where it's matzah zu and maror zeh. So for matzah zu, literally, you pick up the middle matzah, you wave it around, matzah zu, and you point to it, everyone points to it. Maror, you literally go to the Seder plate, you pick it up, maror zeh. The leader of the Seder, ideally, is one who'll raise it, or you can ask someone else. Could you please pick it up and you do it then? Okay. Toward the end of Magid section is a section of Hallel. There are different customs about whether you have the matzah covered and you hold the cup until the end. Personally, I just say one more paragraph with it, with the matzah, with the cup in my hand, and then I put the cup down and I uncover it again. When I start the Hallel part itself, the paragraph begins with the word lefichach, and therefore we're obligated, it's our duty to pay tribute, to thank, and to praise, and to exalt, and to elevate, etc. Right, the one who made all these miracles for us, etc. So you'll see the instruction. It's right here inside. Okay. Next, you'll see that there's a bracha, the birkat geula. So that's the blessing at the end of the Magid section. It tells you what to do. Again, the instructions just plain. Just go through it. If you reviewed before, I like to review, by the way, the Shabbos before Pesach, the Shabbat Gadol. I have a tradition. I try to go through much of the Haggadah, not all, but much of it. On Shabbat Gadol in the afternoon, Bein Mincha Lamar, just so I have a familiarity with the text. I've been doing it my whole life, but still, did I notice something? Did I think about something? How's it going to work? Okay, for that blessing, the bracha for the second cup is preceded by a special blessing of Asher Ge'alana, the Birkat Geula, the blessing that is the blessing of redemption. So that is going to be recited. Okay. After you recite the bracha, then it's bar kriyagaf, and again you lean to one side, the left side. You go out to Nirtza, and then you come back for the motzi. Now let me demonstrate the motzi in case you haven't seen it. This is traditionally how we do it. A motzi lecha mina aretz on a holiday needs to really have the mishnah. So to keep that intact, we have the matzah on top and the matzah on the bottom. Again, for those just joining us, on the Pesach Seder night, it ideally really should be a round matzah, ideally handmade shmura matzah. You can't get handmade, so machine-made shmura matzah. You can't get shmura at all, I guess you don't have a choice. Egg matzahs are not acceptable at the Seder for use at the Seder. There's a discussion about people who are really sick and this and that. I won't cover that tonight. The bracha motzach min haaretz is recited. There's no need for salt per se to be poured on the food here. You make the bracha motzach min haaretz, and then. And I always think of the old-fashioned record players, if you still remember what that is. You drop the bottom matzah, pick up these matzahs. You have 1.5 matzahs now in hand, and the blessing is recited on these two. And the bracha is, Asher Kishem Sotzman Al Chilat Matzah. That's the birkat mitzvah, and the mitzvah of eating the matzah. Now, if you want to know how much matzah to eat, you can find in various magazines. The CRC, I'm sure, has it. I know the OU has like a picture in it also. I really love this Haggadah. I will grant you it's deluxe. Probably, I don't know what it retails for, probably $40 or thereabouts. I'm not sure. It's a long time ago. But the Haggadah here is called the Pesach Haggadah Shirat Miriam by Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rivon. It's in English. Has English translation. It is just beautifully done. A lot of color, a lot of pictures, a lot of diagrams. And he walks you through, how to look at and think about a lot of aspects of the Seder. It's actually 2-volume work. The first volume is just the Haggadah, with all the commentary, color-coded, very nicely done. The second volume is essays. Anyway, in this volume, here, I actually brought the second volume here. We have the pictures. So he actually gives you charts in various places, how much do you have to eat? And you can't really see it so clearly, but he'll tell you, if this was a machine square matzah, how much of it would you have to eat? So he explains that, and again, these sizes are really, they are subject to a bit of a judgment call for 2 reasons. Number one, if you have a health concern, so go see the CRC magazine, will tell you how much you actually have to eat. You can weigh it out, measure it, but you cannot weigh food on Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's not allowed, but you can figure it out before. And the standard size of a matzah, the standard size around matzah, we know approximately what it is. So he says, since the square ones are standard, he's using this as the model for how much you have to eat. You just apply it to the size of the handmade matzah. Cheryl asked if to remove or clean the plate like my machorim is messy. I'm sorry, I skipped over that. I passed over your question. The answer is back with the pouring for the plates. So that should be removed because you just poured it out to represent the plates. It's not just because it's messy. It should not be kept on the table. Take it away, rinse it, and bring it back. It's also messy, but that's not the main motivation. The main motivation is you just signify you're pouring out some of your joy because of the sadness of the loss, etc. So you don't want to leave it there. It's meant to be removed. So on Motzi Matzah, ideally, I'm reading it to you from Rabbi Yotzir Rimon, a very sensible fellow. The amount to be eaten at the Seder. Again, this is the ideal. Eating matzah. The matzah itself that you eat should be approximately the size of 2 kizaytim. A kizayit is an olive, but be careful because the days and times in which we live, a kizayit today is probably around the size of 2 olives or approximately the volume of today's egg. And there's a size in the Gemara called the kibetza, which is around the size of 2 eggs today. Why did that happen? So the famous commentator, the Noda B'Yehuda, or Yechetzkel Landau, was the person who shifted us this way. He was a very, very influential person as a posek, and he explained that the size of fruits, vegetables, eggs, etc., back in the Talmudic times were around double what they are today. That the size has changed. That's his contention. He has a whole proof about why that's so. So pretty much everybody falls in line with that, and that's what we try to do. So for this, you should eat about 3/4 of this matzah. If you can't eat 3/4 of this matzah, imagine in your mind, you're not going to have this matzah at your Seder, you're going to have a round matzah. But imagine in your mind approximately this size, so 3/4. You can count up the lines if you like, around this much is how much you should eat for the matzah. Approximately this one, 3/4 of the matzah. That's too hard, so eat just half the matzah. Why is it? If it's too hard, you can do something else. So I feel it's too hard. No, there are different poskim achronim that have different ideas about what constitutes a kizayit, what constitutes a kibetza, and they're kind of unresolved. But it comes down to essentially 2 main people, Avram Chaim Noeh and the Chazon Ish. So we try when we can, when we're dealing with biblical mitzvahs, we try to go the extra mile. We go take the more machmir position. We really want to fulfill the mitzvahs. D'oraita. When we get to D'Rabbanan, we can get by with less. So for the motzi, the eating of the matzah itself, that's all eaten, the matzah is eaten leaning, is approximately this much per person. So you're going to have 3 round matzahs, of which you only had 2.5 left. You're not going to find enough from the matzah that you have. It's not possible. Also, you need the bottom matzah and the middle matzah for later. So you're taking this, and you're using 3/4 of it. Yep, over here. And that's what you eat leaning. Ideally, you should eat it in the span of about 4 to 5 minutes. If you're sitting with a stopwatch, in my view, I think you're making a mistake. I think it's not really what was intended. The point is, it should be that you're steadily sitting and eating. Pretty much the only sound at our Seder during matzah is the chewing. You hear yourself chewing, you hear other people chewing. It's not meant to be dialogue or discussion. It's the middle of the mitzvah that you're doing. So you eat it in a steady manner. Don't stuff yourself. Don't poison yourself. Don't choke. Don't make yourself crazy with stopwatches, with timers, with, oh my goodness. You do not need a ruler to figure out how much matzah it is. And here I make part company with some of my colleagues, and I hope you don't think me too makel. I don't think what Chazal intended, even what the poskim achronim intend, is that person literally is sitting, measuring everything out 100%. Now, if you have a health concern, now wait a minute, you want to get by with less, I understand. So you do want to measure out before Yom Tov, how much is this? So maybe you are going to find how much the half matzah. Oh, good, I'm going to break a half matzah. I'm going to leave 1 on the side to be like my measuring stick. Does this sort of compare? It sort of compares. My point is, a person can get lost in the Seder, either in technical, elaborate divrei Torah, and nobody has a clue what you're talking about, or they could get lost in the technicalities of the shiurim, about how much, and the other people in the Seder, you're losing them, and somehow in that you can also lose yourself. And to think a little bit about how one wants to organize their Seder. They say that, all right, I'll skip the story. Let me tell you the rest of it. If someone can't eat 3/4, eat half. If you're sick, you can get by with 1/3 of the matzah. The korech sandwich. How much is that? The korech sandwich is right after you eat the matzah. Then you eat maror. I'll skip maror for now. I'm talking about how much matzah you need. The korech sandwich is about a half a matzah. If you don't remember anything I'm saying now, don't worry. You'll find it in this Pesach guide. You can go to oukosher.org or OU Passover. Look up the OU also online. They actually have a page called Sizing Up the Seder. I can tell you, in my years of making a Seder, I personally, maybe it's because I'm young and maybe I'm a little foolhardy, I've never brought this to my Seder, ever. I don't start putting pieces on to figure out exactly how much is it. Lozo, like you got to make a sandwich. If it's a tiny little aperitif sandwich, that's not really the sandwich. That's not what was intended. And if you're making a huge gargantuan sandwich, it's also not that. So how do you figure it out? Okay, I feel I have a certain Masorah over the years that I received from my forebears and that I've done year over year. So this is approximately the amount. This is Moshe Feinstein's share. It's a little bit bigger. I don't know if you're lining it up. He makes it seem like you need almost the whole matzah. I think you can go over three-quarters of a matzah. For the korech, he's giving you here, it's about half a matzah, so 2/3 of a matzah, something like that. He's giving you the inches, etc. Okay, if it works for you, if it floats your boat, great. It doesn't work for me, and I don't spend too much time figuring that out. That's not to say I'm skimping. I'm probably going over the line, but the idea of quantification to that degree, for me, it starts losing the flavor of what I'm up to at the Seder and with everybody who's there. Okay, again, no one should read Chalila that I'm saying to be Mako. I'm just saying, don't be machmir in a way that you're gonna lose yourself in the details. When it comes to the afikomen, so ideally, the afikomen is the end of the meal. Ideally, it's 2/3 of a matzah, not 3/4, which is like here, but 2/3. Again, I'm guessing it's around this amount of this size matzah. But again, you're doing it in round, so it's not really going to be exactly the amount because the round matzahs are generally wider. You could get through with a half a matzah if that's all you can really stomach, and if not, again, you could drop to 1/3. Now, why are you using 3/4, 2/3, a half? Because we don't necessarily. It might not be helpful for everybody if you're measuring out for them on a card exactly what it is. Let me pause here. Another question? No. Okay. Maror. How much maror do you have to eat? So here again, Rabbi Yossi just very beautifully. It's like a flow chart. He lays it out for you how much you have to eat. So the maror, ideally, we say since today, for reasons I won't explain too well tonight already, but maror is today derabbanan. It's rabbinic. It's not a biblical mitzvah. The Torah says you have to eat maror. The way the Torah says you have to eat maror is you have to eat the maror and the matzah and the korban pesach. Once you don't have the korban pesach, the matzah still stands on its own because it is in the verses independent of the maror certain times. So it's a standalone. But the maror is only mentioned contingent upon the consumption of the korban pesach. If you don't have the korban pesach, the maror's level drops down a peg and it becomes actually a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So in the chapter on this, Rabbi Yosef Tziriman also gives you like the idea about how much you're supposed to eat, trying to explain, what's what. The maror itself is going to be dipped into the charoset, and there you bring the charoset out. So one person's dealing with a bowl filled with romaine lettuce, washed, checked, ready to go. Another person is dealing with the charoset. For the wine, sometimes they ask the person running the Seder to do it. I don't know why that's something you have to be the one to do, but someone should pour, not from the cups, from a bottle, wine or grape juice, whatever. Something we like to do, like more sweet, so we do more pungent. You pour it in, you mix it in, and then you're dipping the maror into the charoset and shaking it off. The point is that the maror is meant to represent the bitterness, and it is a challenge. Some of us to even taste the bitterness of the maror. I suspect this year, for various reasons, that taste is going to come right back for many of us, unfortunately, who are in feeling what's going on very, very much. And you shake off the charoset, so it leaves a little bit of a residue of the charoset, and the idea that this is the mortar that got onto everything. So it's there, it's shaken off, and then we eat the maror. The maror has a bracha also. The bracha today that we're reciting, though, is a bracha d'Rabbanan. Why does this matter, the Raita d'Rabbanan? When we say the word d'Rabbanan, so the shear, the amount we have to eat, is actually a little bit less. So he just writes that one could, for maror, let's say, as an example, he explains that based on the Mishnah Brura, you can be lenient and eat only about 27 cubic centimeters, which is 0.91 fluid ounces. Or to say it in English, an average lettuce leaf. One. That's maror. You roll it up if you want. You can eat it flat, whatever. It doesn't matter. The Chazon Ish and Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, they held that it's even less. Even less. They hold that it's actually can be in 19 cubic centimeters, which is 0.64 fluid ounces, maybe even 17 cubic centimeters, which is 0.57. In English, a small leaf of lettuce might be enough today. So one can start that way if you want from the start. Now, what's a small little leaf? It doesn't mean a bite size. use your seichel. If you're really stuck, you really want to be machmir, so here you have, it gives you, if the romaine stocks, enough to fill the 3x5 area. So 3x5 area, this looks like much more than 3x5 to me. It's telling you maror 8x10, and if you're using a romaine stock, the stock is 3x5, and if it's the maror leaves, 8x10. Again, quote unquote munaf, that's Rav Moshe, but I think Yeshal Pilismoch to go with the Chazon Ish of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. If you want to be more machmir on yourself, so eat an average size, the whole leaf. Eat that amount. You don't have a whole leaf? Put a bunch of pieces together so you have around the size of a leaf. Your mishayir means you estimate in your mind, what does a romaine leaf look like? Hopefully you've seen the lettuce before. That's what you do. Again, that's the best you can do. And you're eating, that's the kazayit of maror. So that if you rolled it up, it would be around the size of an egg, approximate, a mid-sized egg. If you roll the whole thing up, and you literally have to roll it up. I don't personally roll the whole thing up. I'll fold it over a few times, and you don't mean when you eat the maror. Korech is not sad. Korech is not maror. Korech is actually the sandwich. And the sandwich is the way that Hillel, the famous Hillel HaZaken, how he ate his Korban Pesach. When the Torah says that you should eat the Korban Pesach, al matzah u'merorim yochlu, eat it with matzah and maror, it means to say, perhaps, eat it all together. Since I know you'll ask me, I'll say now that our matzah today already are what are called rikikin. They're hard. So it makes for a beautiful crunchy sandwich. I won't be surprised when Mashiach Tzidkenu arrives. We'll find out that actually our hunch that matzah once upon a time was a lafa. It was a flat, round piece that you could roll stuff into. I mean, it makes sense. There is such a thing as soft matzah. I've heard that Rav Hershel Schachter Shlita maintains that the soft matzah is good to use, even for Ashkenazim. Personally, I've just not done such a thing. My Seder Zichron Livrach, I had a round, hard piece of matzah. That's what I go with. Now, when did it shift and why did it shift is another story about why and when it became hard. But we have many, many hundreds of years of using hard matzah. The structure of the sandwich, of course, is it's a maror and matzah sandwich. You're ordering a burger at a restaurant, and you say, I'd like 2 all-beef patties, give me the special sauce, I want the lettuce, and I want it in a bun. And they present it to you, and you say, as they said in 1984, where's the beef? So it's right there. No, there's no beef here. It's not. I ordered a burger. So that's what you're doing at Korech. You're making the sandwich, and the sandwich doesn't have the meat. You're making a sandwich, and the main thing of the sandwich is missing. It's reminding us what we don't have. So the Korech sandwich is a remembrance to the way that Hillel ate it. He didn't just have the matzah over here, and he ate the Korban Pesach and the maror. He put everything together. He ate it all at the same time, and that's the declaration that we make. And the Korech sandwich, typically, people will put a little bit of charoset into the sandwich. Sometimes people here will shift, and they'll put in horseradish instead of the maror that they ate. If they didn't use horseradish before, they use it now. I put a little horseradish in, but I still go back to, again, another piece of lettuce like I had before, have another one in the sandwich because that horseradish is very strong, the fresh horseradish, and how much of it can you really eat? You can't really eat a shear of it unless you're extremely hardy and hale, and I don't think I'm obviously not on that level. There were those that named the Arizal, Dafka lettuce, the romaine type lettuce for maror, and the horseradish for Korech, but the Magen Avram and others say they never heard of such a thing. You don't really have to. You don't have to do that. The Magen Avram writes it should be the leaves for maror and the stalks for the Korech. The Taz just says no. Do whatever you want to use. It should be some kind of maror. If you want to use horseradish, you want to use maror itself. Here again, the amount of that you're going to use in this case is when you're doing it together. We try when we're eating it as such to eat again. We're eating less because it's the Rabbanan now, but we're eating the same amount of maror we just did before. It's like 1 leaf, and we're eating less matzah in this sandwich. Usually we take from the bottom matzah in order to make it, the unbroken bottom matzah for the sandwich. But how many people can you feed with 1 matzah? Even if it's a beautiful round matzah, not too many people. 1 person, 2 people. So you need to have other matzahs. That's no shame. You bring it out, you wrap it up in order to make it work. Okay. That's Korech. We're rounding out the Seder now in terms of my helpfulness, I think. Shulchan Aruch is the meal. If you never ran a Seder before, you don't remember previous years, but it's a great year for this. Shulchan Aruch is part of the Seder. It's a stage in the Seder. Hopefully you're eating delicious, wonderful foods, but you should enjoy yourself. It should be an enjoyable, nice meal, with the extent possible to find a little simcha. I don't know how many other people want to have wine at the Seder, at the Suda, that they're going to have another 2 cups of after, but that's up to you. To sing some zmiras, to have some nice songs for Pesach. One is happy to be at the Seder. The Vilna Gaon writes in one place that it's one of the hardest mitzvahs in the Torah is v'samach b'chagecha. And for some of us this year, it is going to be a challenge. We'll get through it. There'll be other Pesachs. We'll make it next year. But a person shouldn't feel bad to not be mekayem the mitzvahs. You're doing the mitzvahs. You're doing a beautiful job. And Hashem knows the challenges that we have this year. But we can't endanger our lives. We can't endanger other people. We have to do whatever we can. And that's Shulchan Aruch, is to have a little bit of that simcha also at the table. I've tried, not always successfully, but I blame myself. I don't blame anybody else at my Seder, to try at the Shulchan Aruch to not engage in just a frivolous conversation. We're not on break from the Seder. I'm still wearing the kittel. There's candles are lit. There's people. You want to take a little break, but just to be mindful, it's still part of the religious nature of that. It's part of this leil of the leil HaSeder is a leil avoda. The afikomen should be the last thing that one eats at the night of the Seder altogether. One is not meant to brush one's teeth at the leil HaSeder, certainly not the first night, probably not the second night either, really, by rights. And the idea is because you have the taste of the matzah and the taste of the wine in your mouth when you go to sleep. And the idea that when one brush one's teeth, you're sort of getting rid of the matzah. If you have a health concern, okay, I don't know, I guess you have no choice. But one night of the year, that a person should go to bed with the tam, the taste, the ein maftir nafachar Pesach afikomen means after we eat the korban Pesach, we don't eat dessert. That's what we tell the Ben Chacham. So ironically, here we're eating the afikomen is the matzah, and we're not going to have a korban Pesach, unfortunately, unless Mashiach comes between now and Pesach, in which case we will. But if he doesn't come in time, so then that's what we're going to have. It's a half an egg portion. So that's less. That's even less for the afikomen. I mentioned that before. But there are those who maintain that this eating is the most important. So ideally, it should be, again, 2/3 of a matzah. You can't do a half a matzah. You'll see all of that written into the Haggadah itself if you have with some instruction. The 3rd cup is poured. The Seder plate comes back to the table. It does not have to be on the table during the eating. It comes back to the table. You make your Birkat Hamazon. If there's a mezumin, there should be a mezumin to lead together the 3rd cup. At the end, over the 3rd cup, you actually physically hold it in hand while the person who's leading leads. And that person then at the end of benching puts it down. Then everybody raises their goblet and everybody says the bracha Baruch Gafen. And the 5th cup is poured, usually at that time. The 4th cup is poured while the cup for Eliyahu is poured. At that time, open the door. We say the paragraph of Shvach Hamatcha, and then we close the door, and then we begin the rest of the Haggadah. We recite Hallel, and then from there go to our 4th cup on the Hallel, and then we recite Nirtza, and then the songs that come to the end of the Haggadah. Okay, I feel like I've been through the whole Pesach Seder, because I have, with you tonight. I thank everyone for joining us. Let me pause in case there are more questions about the running of the Seder, anything that I've said tonight. I'm happy to try to answer. Maybe I can't answer, and I'll have to come back another time to you. I don't see any hands, and I don't see any questions. So, okay. Oh, Francie, you have a question? Oh, there was a thumbs up. Okay, good. So I want to wish everyone a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a happy and a kosher Pesach. It's instructive that normally every Yom Tov we wish each other a Chag Sameach. I said already the other day on our Tillim call yesterday. I'm repeating again. In Chodesh Nisan, the arrival, God willing, of Pesach, Haba Aleinu L'Tov. It's already in the air. It's just inside of 2 weeks. But we can do this. We can make Pesach beautiful as we can make it, as an act of sacrifice to Hashem. We're sacrificing maybe not being with family and friends, and that is sad. But we're doing it because we're saying to Hashem, we want to stay alive, we want to be healthy, we want to have another year, we want to have another simcha we could go to, we want to be a community again, God willing, Haba Aleinu L'Tova should be restored soon. And we should know that we wish each other every Yom Tov a Chag Sameach. We add Chag Kasher V'Sameach is novel for Pesach, but we want to make sure that we amplify this year, especially Chag Kasher V'Sameach, that we should be zochim to both of those this year. Both the kashrut and the simcha. We could find some simcha being lifnei Hashem, being in the presence of Hashem, each of us in our own homes and residences on this Pesach. All the best.